Hi, guys. Welcome to Touched by Prayer. I am so super excited. I know that last week we kind of had some glitches, but guess what? We are back with Blake Healy. Heck to the yeah. It is going to be a fun filled hour. We are going to talk about his latest book called, pull it up here. It's called Indestructible. Holy moly. We're going to just share some stuff, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background about Blake. If you guys are on, make sure that you say where you're from. I'm just looking here to see where everybody is, and we're going to get you guys up and running. So thank you guys for tuning in. Share this broadcast. Trust me, if you do any type of ministry, you definitely want to see this. If you know somebody who's in ministry, they need to see this. This is must see Facebook Live or must see like TV. Serious. I'm not joking, because the stuff that I've read and the things that that Blake has to share is just incredible. I was actually given his first book, which was called The Veil, and I was given it. It was given to me as a birthday present, and it was so funny because prior to that, I kept getting this like Facebook, like, friends you might know, and it was like Blake Healy. I'm like, who is this guy? And it's like, hey, he's the director of the School of Supernatural in Atlanta. I'm like, yeah, no. And it wasn't that it's just that I was like, I want to be connected to the right people. And then on my birthday, I was given the book The Veil. And let me just tell you something. When I read the book, The Veil, it opened up something inside of me that I went, holy moly. So when I started to read this book, I had a supernatural encounter that was just so crazy. As I was reading his book on the beach, and he was talking about that he was eating this bag of sour cream and cheddar potato chips. This wind came out of nowhere, and this bag came and attached itself to my legs, and it was a bag of sour cream and cheddar potato chips. Heck yeah. So angels are always working. And that's one of the things that is that he really talks about, is that there is stuff that is happening in the supernatural, because he's been seeing things in the supernatural since he's been a little kid. And now with this book, Indestructible, he teaches us the enemy's game plan. We don't have to sit there and wonder anymore, like, what is this? No. He breaks it down. So that's why I'm saying that this is something that we need to all have, because don't we want to live a life that is indestructible? So without further ado and without further yakking, I'm going to bring on Blake, because that is why we are here, right? So share. Hi, Blake. Thank you so much for coming on Touched by Prayer. It was such an honor to have you on the last time, and I am so triply honored to have you back on. You are just absolutely awesome sauce, and I do mean that with complete sincerity.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you last time, and I'm really excited to spend some time with everyone here again.
Okay, so this book, as I said to you off air, I said this book, Indestructible. Let me just put it this way so people can see. Okay, so this book, Indestructible, is must read viewing. I really believe that if you are in ministry, I think I got the editor copy. I don't know why. No, you got to understand, because I will be meeting you. And when I do meet you, guess what I'm bringing? I'm bringing this. And that's what you're going to sign, because I love to have people sign my books. I think it's important to honor people who write. And I think I feel very honored to have have them signing books. So I felt like this was such a gift, because I felt like, ooh, hot off the press. So as I started, there's so much I want to get into, and I don't want to give away the entire book, but I do want to talk about a couple chapters that really, really hit me. And especially, we'll get into that. But first I want to talk to you about what brought you to write this book, because in this book, as opposed to some of your other books, you really kind of talk about the demonic, and you talk about it in such a way that we actually have that you're showing the tricks of the enemy, so to speak. It's almost like you went behind the lions and you started to say, hey, see this? That's why this happens. And so what brought you to writing this book?
Yeah. My first two books, I really only talked about the demonic as much as I needed to kind of, draw a picture of kind of my experiences. For those who don't know me, a big part of my testimony is that I've seen in the spirit since I was very young. So I've been seeing angels, demons, and other spiritual things for as long as I can remember. And a big part of that experience was learning that what I wanted to do, 99 times out of 100 was to focus on what God was doing, was to focus on the angelic, was to focus on the Holy Spirit. And that's still very much what I wanted to do. And so for a long time, I didn't even really want to write a book like this, just because I really don't like giving any more attention to the demonic than I need to, But and I do talk about this in the book, kind of my process with the Holy Spirit, in just kind of talking through that even though I still very much believe that we want to focus on what God's doing, that sometimes understanding the way that the enemy works can help us not be tricked into just getting stuck in some of the cycles and some of the traps that he tries to get us into. And so, and also the other thing was that I've been seeing in the spirit for as long as I can remember. So after 30 years of seeing in the spirit, I started to realize that there were some patterns that when I would look at people, that there were certain people when I would look at them, that it seemed like even though that they would be attacked, or that the enemy would try to bother them just as much as anyone else, I noticed that certain people, these attacks just didn't seem to have any effect, that these people really just were not being nearly as affected as some other people. And so over the years, I started to look at what are the qualities, what are the things, what are these things that make people resistant to the enemy? And that's really the theme of the book. That's why the title is Indestructible. What are the things that we can do with our lives that make our lives incompatible with the plans of the enemy, and a place that actually attracts the plans of God? So that was really the heart behind the book.
Well, let me just tell you, I'm gonna go into just a couple of the things that really kinda highlighted to me. Some of the things that you kinda talked about a little bit in the veil, which were about how you were able to overcome fear, and how God was able to show you how that fear was just like a game, like a ride at Disney World, that, that when the lights come on and when you see, you go, "Oh, wait a second, there's nothing to fear here, because
Yeah.
this is all just, it's just smoke and mirrors, so to speak." But one of the things that I loved is that there is a chapter that you really talk about how sometimes that the enemy can put like a veil that shows other people, because we look through a veil
Mhm.
sometimes, we interpret things through a veil, and sometimes the veil that we're looking through isn't so much a godly veil, but it's a veil based on our hurts and our wounds. And so can you
Absolutely.
kind of talk about like how how you got that revelation?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the kind of most succinct stories that really outlines this experience is I'm the director of the Bethel Atlanta School of Supernatural Ministry. So I direct our ministry school here, and part of my job is when a student kind of has maybe a bigger problem, they end up needing to talk to me. Now, we don't like to call it, being like sent to the principal's office exactly, but if it doesn't necessarily make it to me if it's a small problem. So I remember on this just one particular day, I had 3 conversations with students on my schedule that I was going to need to have, and I as I went to each one, the first one, it was a younger guy. As I was talking to him, I just noticed that he looked so nervous. And of course, whenever I'm going through these kinds of conversations, I'm trying to be as honoring as possible. I'm trying to address the issue directly, but I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be honoring. But every single word that's coming out of my mouth, this guy is just kind of cringing. He almost looks like I'm about to hit him, even though that's really not the posture I'm trying to go for whatsoever. And I all of a sudden, I just saw this this kind of thin screen between him and myself when I looked in the spirit. And on this screen, I saw a picture of myself, now with kind of exaggerated features. And anytime I would make a movement of any kind, it would be exaggerated and almost like more aggressive. towards this person, and I was asking the Holy Spirit what was going on, and I heard him say, like, this is the lens that he's seeing you through. That this is what his history, his experiences, maybe the way that he was raised, maybe his experience with other leaders has taught him to expect from leadership, and that was affecting the way that he was experiencing me. So I kind of used that to try to ask him some questions. Hey, do you think I'm going to punish you? Do you think I'm going to, that you're just in trouble, And we were able to really just kind of get to the root of the issue. Now I went to another student, and after having this experience, I kind of, looked for that screen right away. And when I did this time, every the version of myself that I saw on the screen, every single movement, every single response to what the girl was saying looked like I was ignoring her, looked like I was being condescending, like I was talking down to her, and she, even in the middle of talking, just kind of burst out with, "You're not listening to me. You don't understand how I feel. You don't care how this is affecting me," And again, I was realizing she had this lens of that leadership or people in authority don't value you, or that they're not going to listen to you or not going to value what you have to say. And ironically, the funny thing was she burst out with that right after I had repeated back to her word for word what she had said just a moment ago. The last student that I met with that night, I was meeting with her. And the whole time, at first, the image that I saw looked like it was pretty much the same as me, but I noticed that there was just little subtle movements, little subtle change to the way that I was talking. And the best way I can describe it was almost kind of like the oily, manipulative way that like a salesperson would talk to you, like a bad salesperson. And I could, I could tell that this woman, again, her lens was that she was expecting to be manipulated. She was expecting to be controlled. She was expecting kind of to be coerced, and was putting up her defenses to try to kind of avoid that. And so again, it really just shows how the enemy tries to take pieces of our history, pieces of our experience, and have us put those up almost as defensive mechanisms of, okay, I know that people are like this, or I know that people are going to reject me, or going to be rude to me, or going to try to control me, or going to try to manipulate me, whatever it is, and can try to get us to damage our connection with other people by building up defenses against something that may not actually be there. And so that's just been a big thing.
Well, I love, and that's such a perfect segue, because the next thing is, what does the enemy come to do? He comes to steal and kill and destroy. That is his motive operandi, so to
Yeah.
speak. He doesn't change. He does the same thing. He did the same thing in Jesus's time. He's doing the same thing right now. So where does he go after? He goes after relationships. And so by having that veil, because there is something being skewed, we can say that might even be like the Leviathan spirit, because we have all these different names of all these different demons, but the reality is, regardless of who it is, it's the reality that it's there, that there is something that we can see through. And so when you, who are so quiet and so calm, when I read in the book that the one guy saw you as this really big guy, who's gonna like punch his lights out, it cracked me up. But it made such a huge impact at how are people seeing me. And so what are some of the strategies that we can use, so that if we're starting to see things, because I know in the one thing, like you said, you started to talk, but there were some who were able to receive what you said, and were able to then that veil came down. But then there were others who had deeper wounds, deeper hurts, and deeper mindsets that you couldn't skew them back to see things in the truth, right?
Totally. And that's one thing I'd really encourage people out there is, and this is just so important, is you can't control anyone. And even if you're trying to control them away from something bad and towards something good, you still can't control people, And so it's so important. And that's something I've learned in these situations, especially in those kind of leadership moments, where I can try to address the issue. I can try to be direct about the issue. But if I get into blame, if I get into just straight, trying to call them out on these things, and I can say this from experience, even when I can literally see what's going on, and even when I'm with someone who knows that I can see what's going on, it's amazing how our natural defenses get riled up if I bring any kind of accusation, any kind of blame to the way that I address those things. And so it's just so important that we recognize that all I can do is keep my love on. All I can do is maintain my love. I can offer approaching an issue or approaching a subject. I can offer saying, and again, that in the book, and this has been years and years of learning, so this isn't something I just came by naturally, but instead of saying like, don't be scared of me, I'm not, because that's probably just going to scare him more. I said, hey, are you scared? I invited a question. I invited vulnerability. I kind of showed care, and said, hey, I'm not going to do that. And, and if I had kind of looked back and realized like, oh, maybe I was being too aggressive, I probably would have apologized and say, hey, I'm not trying to make you feel that way. Here's what I want to do. I want to work towards this, And so letting people know your goal, again, this is that thing of reminding ourselves that we don't fight against flesh and blood. And so even when someone is under demonic influence, if I start thinking that I can disrespect them or kind of turn my love off towards them when I am addressing them, I'm actually playing into what the enemy wants to do, which is to create discord, create disconnection. So it's just so important that we just walk through like showing respect to the person. And even when people, again, I've been in, not necessarily with students, but other situations where people are shouting at me and just yelling, accusing, and just sometimes showing that I'm listening can totally disempower that voice, that thing that's driving them of, hey, I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm asking you a question about it. That little bit of love that I can show. And sometimes that's all you got is I can show you that I'm willing to listen to you. And that little love can silence so many bad voices. So
I love that. I really do. And I also think like throughout the book, you kind of describe the different, not that we're going to focus, but it's like, when you start to see the demonic and you start to describe them, like most people who think of the demonic, including me, hello, I'm just raising my hand, we've been taught because of media, we've been taught that the devil and the demons are really bad and they're really big and they're really scary and and it's interesting because there are so many times as I've read the different descriptions of the different demons that you saw, especially like when in the first book in the veil, when you were talking about like the ones that were sitting on your shoulder, and I was like, after I read that book, I was like, okay, stop, get off. I'm like, no, because honestly, like if you don't think for an instant that you don't have some stuff on you, man, I'm telling you, you actually need deliverance to start believing that you got some stuff on you, because we all got stuff, because we live in a broken world. And it's not that it's necessarily our fault. It's just that, sometimes, when the poop hits the fan, it gets splattered. And so it gets on you. It just gets on you. And so sometimes you just have to constantly keep yourself in that place where you're like, wait, because you even talked, and I thought it was really, really that you were so vulnerable, and just like even talking about like your wife in the book that you kind of shared. I mean, that's really, look, you're like, hey, wait a second, you're the director of the School of Supernatural, and you still see stuff, with your wife and your children, and wait, whoa, you're talking about that stuff, not a lot of people, no, I'm being very serious. A lot of people would not be that willing to be that transparent, because that really just shows the humility that you walk in. It shows that, look, I got stuff too. You talk about your stuff from your childhood, and then you talk about stuff even as you've grown and as you've matured, but you still see the stuff, and you can see how it can enter in even in a place where you see stuff. So can we talk just a little bit about, I'm not going to so much go about talking about your wife, but I do want to talk about like friendships, because a lot of people, of course, when when you first meet you and you know what you walk in, probably the first thing people say is like, what do you see? And then you probably sit and go, oh, you really don't want to know. You just don't want to know. Like, trust me, just trust me. And I love the fact that you protected your friends. And I thought that was so, like, you saw, but you didn't say, because you wanted to, and you kind of talked about that you saw but you didn't say, and you often wondered, should you have said? But I think it was beautiful the way that you were watching to see that something that was small was getting bigger, but yet you then saw that as the correction came. So could you kind of talk about that story with the thing that was hanging on the guy's neck?
Oh yeah. No, yeah. This story either makes people really angry at me or really happy with me, depending on the circumstance. But
Well, I'm going to tell you that this is a safe place. We don't judge,
totally.
because we are all here to learn. So anybody who got some judgment, we need to kick that demon to the curb.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I had this one guy who was a student, and I remember, I'll try to tell abbreviated version of the story, but he showed up one day. He was a little bit late to class, and he's kind of obviously haggard, and kind of rushing to get in. He's dragging his backpack, and trying to get to class. And I just stop and say, hey, what's going on? He just kind of listed all the things he had going on. He had extra stuff at work. He had a side project he was trying to do. He was working on writing a book. He had taken on some extra projects at school and everything. He was just kind of that personality kind of guy, like to be busy, like to have a lot going on. But I could just tell by his demeanor that it was kind of dragging on him. And when I looked in the spirit, I just saw this demon just sitting at the back of his neck, and it was only about yay big or so, but it kind of looked like a leech, that was just sitting there at the back of his neck. And so, again, I didn't tell him about it at that point, and I just want to address for a moment that, and I talk about this in the book more, but there were so many times in my history that when I would share about demonic things that I saw in people, it would cause so much fear, it would cause so much confusion, that for really, over 10 years, maybe 12 or 13 years, I didn't talk about the demonic at all, just because I'm like, the response that I get is so disproportional to what it actually is. And it's either causing unnecessary fear or fueling unhealthy fascination. And so I had to really learn partially I had to learn how to present it in the correct light. And also partially I had to learn when it was time to share and when it was not time to share. And so because of that, I've often been very, hesitant to share about those things. And so I didn't share about it. I just asked him some questions about his schedule and asked him, hey, how's that working out for you? He said, I think I got it. It's just a season. I'm just going to push through and we're going to make it happen. So a few weeks go by and I run into the student again, and I look at him and he's looking even more haggard, and this demon has grown. It's like kind of swelled up like a tick. And I'm sorry, it's kind of gross, but it had swelled up and was hanging about to the middle of his back or so, a little bit above that. And he's like, oh yeah, my boss hired these new people at work, and he asked me to train all of them, and I'm still working on my side business, and I'm still working on writing this book, and hey, a couple of the leaders at these group projects for school that I was doing had to drop out, so I'm now leading a couple of those projects. And again, he's clearly haggard, he's clearly overcommitted, and I'm asking him some questions about, hey, is that working out for you? And he's like, I got it. It's just a season. We'll just keep working on it. And it just kept on going. And then finally one day he showed up late to class again. He came dragging in. He's looking pale. He's looking not okay. And I see a couple more demons following him. And then the demon on his back is hanging all the way down to his kind of past his belt kind of line. And I'm thinking, okay, I should probably talk to him. And he's running by and he's saying, oh, okay, hey Blake, yeah, I'll see you soon. Gotta get to class. I'm like, hey, wait a minute and sit down. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, how's it going? And again, he went over all the things that he had going on, all the commitments, and then he got to the point where he started talking about how he had missed some of his kids' soccer games because of just these huge commitments that he had. And the second he started talking about that, I saw this demon with a big dark bucket of shame, just dropped shame over his head, just came pouring down over him. And I just, it was just this shame at how that, because he was a big family guy as well, and loved his family a lot. And it was really having the shame of how this was affecting his family. And, I finally just confronted him and said, look, you can't do all this. This is not healthy. And I asked him questions that I ask a lot of Christians, which is, and people are often surprised by this, but it's so important. I said, what do you do for rest? And what do you do for fun? And he looked kind of shocked at first. And then I said, what do you do for fun? He said, work. And I said, no, fun is something that you do just for the sake of doing it, that you do just for the joy of doing it. It's not about what you get out of it. It's not about what the end result is. It's about the joy that you experience doing it. And I said, fun is something that God has given us to protect the fruit of the Spirit of joy, which is part of life in Him. It's not a secondary fruit or a side fruit. It's something that and again, it's a fruit of the Spirit, not a gift of the Spirit. Fruit of the Spirit is something you're meant to grow, that you're meant to steward, that you're meant to tend to in your life. And fun is how we tend to joy, how we protect and build joy in our life. I asked him about rest, and of course, I already knew the answer. He liked to work a lot and would work. He was working until 1 o'clock in the morning every night trying to get this project done, all this stuff. And I said, look, rest is not just about passing out at the end of the night or just crashing in front of the TV. It's about living. It's a standard. It's about living our life in a way that protects the fruit of the Spirit of peace in our life, that ensures that we don't violate peace, that we don't violate a peaceful life and being able to live and operate out of peace. And it's just, it's so important. Again, it's a fruit of the Spirit. It's part of God's nature that's meant to be manifested in us. And so, I just talked to him about it and said, hey, this just isn't going to work. You need to change what you're doing. And so, he was awesome. He changed. He took his family on a vacation. He talked with his boss and said, hey, I can train one of these guys. I can't train all these new guys. He had his side business, said, okay, I'm going to put this project on hold. I'm going to work on it later. He already at our school administrator wasn't supposed to be running as many projects as he was. So we corrected that also. And I saw him, after he had gone on the vacation with his wife and family, and all the demons that had been following him were gone, and the demon that had been on the back of his neck was gone. And I want to kind of just real quick address another angle there is, it's so important to recognize that, 99% of the time, the demons aren't the problem. They're a symptom of the problem. That demon wasn't causing him to overwork. It was taking advantage of the fact that he chose to overwork. And that's so, so important because, one, it helps us understand what we can do, but it also helps us understand that we're powerful, that it's our choices that make room or don't make room for the enemy. And I never told him about the demons that were attacking him. We just had a conversation about how his behavior was hurting him. He changed the behavior, and the demons were gone because they had nothing left to eat. They had nothing left to feed on.
I do want to share something in the very, very beginning of my walk with the Lord when I really started to hear him. The Lord said to me, he said, Lisa, he says, everything has to eat. He says, including demons. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? And he said that sometimes what they do is they cross feed. He says, so if you have a demon of fear and a demon of anger, the demon of anger will get the demon of the person who has the spirit of fear on them will get that person fearful. And then the person who becomes fearful becomes angry and gets into a fight with the person who has anger. And so they cross feed. And I'm like, get the heck out of here. But you're the first person who's ever said feed. And the fact that when I saw that in the book, that it was feeding, I went, oh, wait a second. Because now this was like in 2010 when I shared it with somebody, they said, okay, you're nuts. But I knew that because it wouldn't be something I would think of, but it makes so much sense. And I love what you said is that everything has to come out of a place of choice. that what we give choice to, what we open doors to, is what we let in. And so, like, even like when I was reading the book The Veil, and you were talking about some of these things, the reason I responded the way that I did is because if I did open up that door, if I did through my choices allow those things, I repented. I washed my hands. I literally went into the bathroom and I washed my hands. And I said, Lord, I forgive me, because I knew that I couldn't just wash them or flick them off. Well, that's what I originally did. But I knew that it had to come from a choice of coming into a place where it's like, okay, no, this can't, I don't want this to be in me. So Lord, what do I need to do? Do I need to go repent? Do I need to take a breath? What do I need to do? And I think that, we have the Holy Spirit that guides us into all truth. But sometimes we get so wrapped up in our stuff that we fail to listen. And so I think that I love what you said is that, it's not that demons just hop on people. They have to have a right. They have to have a permission, so to speak.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing that's so powerful. It's recognizing that our choices matter, and that we always have a choice, that we
absolutely,
even those moments where that guy may have felt like, I don't have a choice, I got to get all this stuff done. It's, I don't remember who said it, but it's a good quote of that, hey, every human being on the planet has the same number of hours in the day. And so we all are, everyone is equal in that regard, that we all get to choose how we spend our time. And yes, I know circumstances can make that more difficult or more complicated, but it's one of just the fundamental things that God has just given us authority over us. We get to choose how we spend our life, and knowing that and choosing that is just so powerful.
Absolutely. And that also kind of goes into, because you were talking about fun, and you know what, you can't have fun by yourself. Well, some people can, but I choose to do it with friends. I choose to go have fun with my family, or go to have fun with my friends. And so one of the chapters that you said that you really felt that you wrote the entire book about was the part about community. And can I personally tell you, that was one of my favorite. And when you actually are running with the right people, your run is you just have a better sprint. You just have a better stride, So why don't you talk a little bit about, like, because you said that you really felt like you wrote that whole book just for that one chapter.
Yeah. No, that was really, and it's not because it's the most revolutionary thing or the most, out of the box thing, but it is the number one thing that I do see missing in a lot of the people that I run into. Every single person I've ever met that's under some kind of demonic torment, I ask them 3 questions. And the first two we already kind of addressed. I say, what do you do for fun? What do you do for rest? And then my last question, which really is the most important, is who are your friends? And almost always the people that are under the most demonic torment are missing usually all 3 of those things, or one of them very, very strongly. And again, these things they're fundamental. They're so important. And one of my favorite stories about this that's just so powerful, it really shows the power of community and connections, is this friend of mine. Again, I'm going to try to be brief with this story, but he was going through a hard time. He was he came to my wife and I and said, hey, my wife is wanting to move towards divorce. And these things are always complicated, so I don't want to, unfortunately, for the sake of time, I got to make it simple. But so there's always more nuance to it. But when you really boiled it down to it, he wanted to keep working on the marriage, and she was done. Didn't want to work on it anymore. Just didn't feel that they were right for each other. And so he came to me and my wife just said, hey, I'm just kind of dealing with this, and just want to let you guys know nothing's final yet. But I just saw this demon standing behind him, and this demon had this dark kind of cloak on with a hood, and it had a knife in its hand. And I could just feel that this was bad news. And he said, hey, nothing's final yet, so there's still some hope. And even when he said that word hope, it just looked like the demon wanted to stab him, And But he said, but I just want to kind of pull my community close during this time. And so I'm talking to you and your wife. I'm talking to a couple other couples and talking to some single friends of mine just to say, hey, speak into my life, give me feedback, let me know what's going on. And hey, can I just come to you and ask for help or guidance and insight if I need? Just kind of, I want to open up this conversation. And I watched week after week and met with him, talked with him as the marriage kind of continued to deteriorate. And he came to my wife and me when his wife had finally decided that she wanted to make it permanent and was going to make the paperwork final. And he said, hey, I don't feel good about trying to fight her or make it complicated or anything, but I'm just hoping that something changes. And at that point, I saw 3 or 4 demons around him. And as he was speaking, I saw that demon with the knife just plunge the knife towards his back. I even kind of cringed just in sympathetic pain. But I watched as this knife just got snagged in something several inches away from my friend. And it was like, and it pulled back and tried to stab again, and it was like it got stuck in something. And then I saw this other demon jump towards him and start trying to scratch at him, but it couldn't get close. And as it did, I could feel this sense of bitterness rise up. I could feel this anger towards his wife, thinking why did you do this? Or why are you choosing this? And wanting to blame her for everything. I could feel that kind of feeling rising up. And then I saw another demon jump towards him, and I could feel this depression, this loneliness, this aching sorrow, depressive thing just kind of well up. But again, it couldn't touch him. And I just watched this one after the other. These demonic things tried to jump on him and just could not touch him. And I said, hey, how's it been going? And he said, I'm sad. I'm scared about what's going to happen, but I feel connected to my friends. I feel connected to my community, and I feel connected to God. And so the story went on, and the divorce went through, and I watched as year after year, or month after month, week after week, and now it's been year after year as he's drawn closer to that community, drawn closer to God, and one by one, every one of those demons stopped being around him at all. And I remember I was talking with him. It was, I guess it was about 1.5 years after the divorce had been finalized, and only that one demon was left, the one with the dark hood and the knife. And I said, hey, how you been doing? He said, I'm really just I'm still sad about what happened, but I'm really for the first time feeling like I can just dream about the future and dream about what God has for me next. And I feel closer to God than I ever have in my entire life. I feel closer to my friends more so than I ever had in my entire life. And as he said that, I saw this demon just out of rage lift that knife above its head in 2 hands and just kind of plunge it down right at him. But again, it hit whatever this invisible barrier was, and it deflected and even stumbled to the ground, and it hissed at him, and it hissed so viciously that even spit came out of its mouth. But even the spit stopped on this barrier, and the demon left, and I never saw it again. And God, even now, it makes me emotional just because I saw in that moment when I looked at that demon, all of the evil that it just wanted to release through this one circumstance, through this one painful event, how it wanted to destroy him, how it wanted to just destroy his ex-wife, destroy their families, destroy any future children that they would have, even with other people. And just all of the pain that it wanted to release into the world through this one event, and just the beauty of that much evil not getting to enter the world. Wow. Because of my friend's choices, that he pulled a community close to him so that literally no matter what demonic thing tried to attack him, it just literally couldn't touch him.
I mean, I love that because, scripturally it says, above all things, guard your heart, because that's where that stuff can get in. And I really, really love, because there are so many people who, when they're going through something really hard and difficult, they tend to go and retreat and just be by themselves. And
Yeah.
And so what that chapter really talked about was the importance of community, of having people
Yeah.
who love you, who could speak life into you, who can keep you into a place of, there's a hope, there's a future, and just start to shift and change, and to cry with you, because going through a divorce is sad, and
Yeah.
it's rough, and he was believing for something, and he could have gotten very bitter at God. He could have gotten very bitter at his wife. He could have been, talking bad about her, and he could have been doing
Mhm.
that. And that's what the enemy was waiting for. That's what I love about that particular chapter, is it's like it says that the enemy is a lion waiting and seeking whom he can devour. And it's like,
Mhm.
um, I have a joke with a friend of mine, and it's like, and I always tell her, I go, "Thank you for riding the crazy bus with me." And she said, "I will always ride the crazy bus with you. Whenever you need somebody, you will not go on the crazy bus by yourself, because there are times that we go through stuff, and so you don't let the people that you love go through things by themselves. So if you feel like there's somebody who's kind of separated themselves, or they feel that they've retreated, this is such a great story, and such a important one, so that you can say, well, I can see what they're doing, but this is what we need to do. We need to go in full on, full force, and full on love, because that's
Mhm.
like basically everything is about love, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other thing I just love to mention about this story is
Mhm.
it's not like it was a perfect, fairy tale kind of situation. There were days he was desperately sad. There
Oh,
were days where he was hurting. It's not there was still a lot of healing, a lot of process. And it's been a few years now, and he's still, wrapping that season up. But again, it was a true healing process. It wasn't just an unnecessary or an over the norm battle. It was just, he was able to just truly go through the actual healing of the places that have been hurt, and that's just so precious.
Well, and I do want to, like, okay, sometimes we'll sit there and we will come against something, and we'll start battling, and we'll be fighting, and we'll be,
Mhm.
throwing holy water at it. I mean, we're doing whatever we can do. We'll throw the kitchen sink at a demon thinking that it's going to move. But what we're not understanding is that sometimes the person, or even ourselves, God forbid, but we can open up an area that we have given permission. As, what am I missing here? What am I missing? Because sometimes we're fighting stuff where the enemy has us fighting. Sometimes the enemy will throw out smaller demons. Here, go deal with that one. Go deal with that one. And we're thinking we're getting the victory. But just like you said, I'm going back to the man who started with one. He started with one demon on the back. And then by the time
Mhm.
he saw, he had three, including shame,
Mhm.
which was so good, because somebody was talking to me about the one time she had deliverance with someone, and she was with another pastor, and when they did deliverance, this woman threw up this black stuff. And again, I just finished reading that in your book. I'm like, get the heck out of here. That was shame. That was shame, because I just read it. But
Mhm.
it's like God will always confirm his word. He will confirm. And so sometimes, we can sit there, and we can look, the blood of Jesus is what gave us the ability to conquer. It's what gave us the ability. But sometimes we have to step back, and we have to say, like David said in the Psalms, search me, O Lord, show
Mhm.
me my stuff, show me where this stuff came in. Because that man who was doing all that great stuff, it didn't look like he was doing anything bad. But
Mhm.
yet, because he wasn't in a place of rest, and he was constantly trying to people please, and he was trying to do and be like the Superman, this stuff was coming in. So the other thing I do want to talk about, because I know our time is kind of coming short, but the most important thing I really believe in having victory is in intimacy with the Lord.
Mhm.
And so I just want you to kind of let's kind of bring it back to where we really get our victory. And that
Yeah.
really is in the secret place.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's, the way I like to approach it is, and it's the same metaphor that's used in the Bible so frequently about our intimacy with the Lord is using the metaphor of marriage. Almost the whole book of Song of Solomon is fills that picture. And I my wife and I do some premarital counseling at our church for some of the young couples, and there's this assessment that we use to kind of see. It's not really a compatibility test, but just kind of assesses where they're at, some of their strengths and weaknesses. And there's a few questions on the assessment that are kind of trap questions. They're questions they test for what the psychologists call idealistic distortion, which is basically like rose-tinted glasses or something like that, or unrealistic expectations. And one of the questions is more or less phrased something like this: of I feel that spending time together will automatically bring us closer together. And obviously the key word there is automatically. And while it's true that you need to spend time together to grow closer as a couple, sometimes spending time together can actually build resentment if it's the wrong kind of time, or if there's disconnection going on. And so one of the things I really like to address is just some of the classic truths of a relationship with God that, hey, classic things that we've heard in church since we were little kids of, hey, read your Bible, spend time in prayer and spend time in worship. And, I've met a lot of people in our school and in different environments that, especially with the Bible, that almost have a painful relationship with the Bible because they were maybe forced to read it a lot, or felt like it was kind of a chore or something like that. And just to kind of keep drawing on this marriage metaphor a little bit, one of the things that my wife values a lot is having a clean house. It makes her happy, makes her feel peaceful. We have 5 kids, and so it's also a bit of a rarity. And so, having a clean house really makes her happy. And because of that, this is a big need of hers. And so when there's laundry everywhere, when there's kids' toys everywhere, when the dishes aren't done and starting to pile up, her anxiety also is piling up. And now if I receive her saying, hey, could you please clean, or even her being maybe a little bit stressed or upset, the house is messy, this is stressing me out. If I take that as like, you just need me to do all this work for you. You need me to, why do I have to do this? There's so much work that I have to do just to make you happy. I would not say that because that would not be nice. But so if I take that as like, this is just my duty or my job that I have to do, doing that could be, and I do it with a bad attitude or whatever, that's going to, even if I clean for her, it's going to bring disconnection. But if I recognize that, this is me serving a need that April has, this is me protecting peace in her life, this is me showing her how much I value the things that make her feel peaceful, that make her feel safe, that I can actually make doing the dishes and doing laundry an act of love, an act of intimacy. And the same is true with regard to the Bible and just other ways of connecting with God, that if we treat reading the Bible as like, I just got to get through my chapters, got to read the Bible every year, and it's just my duty, it's going to create disconnection. But if I treat it as something that is, this is God inviting me into who he is. This is God making himself knowable to me. If we really recognize these things for what they are, we can really see who he is. And that really is the prime, the prime tool of not only just victory in Christ, but also spiritual warfare, because spiritual warfare is not about knowing what the enemy is doing. It can be a little bit helpful to know what the enemy is doing, but true spiritual warfare is about knowing who God is and being able to represent him and reveal who he is in our lives and in the lives of others. And we can't do that if we don't know him ourselves, if we haven't experienced him, if we're not connected with him personally. And the one other thing that's just a big thing for me is, I grew up in the church. I grew up a pastor's kid and a missionary kid. And so, knowing about God has just been a part of my life for my whole life. But when I was 12, it was the first time I started going to a church that really taught about the prophetic, about hearing God's voice. And for me, partially it was my age, partially it was this revelation that, oh man, like God actually really wants to talk to me. That he's not just saved me. He's not just, punched my ticket to heaven, but he actually wants to talk with me. He wants to engage with me. He wants to know and be known in a real relationship. I realized that, like, oh my goodness, this is the most magnificent gift that any of us could have, to have access to the King of all kings, to the greatest person in the universe. That again, I think that it's a true tragedy that any one of us would miss out on that, either because we don't know how to engage with that, we view it as like a chore or an obligation, when the reality is every single thing that God does is an invitation to intimacy, to joy, to peace, to everything that is representative in his nature. And so it's a simple thing, but there is so much power when we pray. Angels move. When we pray, the presence of the Lord rushes to meet us, to connect with us, to be with us. In times like this, when there's a lot of fear going around, when you can't look at the news for 5 seconds without getting afraid of something, and even when some of those things are things we're trying to figure out how to be wise about, remembering that the presence of the living God who's sitting on the throne right now is one notch of my attention away. He's here already. His presence is already here. But am I turning and being present with him? And so it's a simple thing, but just like a marriage, it's not just about those big, grand acts of love. It's about the hundreds of thousands of little ones that build up and fuel a fire of connection and passion.
I love that. And one of the things that you talk about in all of your books is you talk about how the angels and how worship is so important. Worship, honest and truly, I love worship. I am such a worshiper, and you'll never see me up on stage, singing. So that's not my call. However, I will be up front worshiping because I love worship. And and it wasn't anything that was taught to me. Well, I guess my dad taught it to me, but I came from a Catholic background. So a lot of this stuff was very new to me, but there was a connectivity that even when I went to a Southern Baptist church and they were singing those old Southern Baptist hymnals, I have a mansion, but I would sing to the top of my lungs, and I would connect in that respect. And I know how important that worship shifts things. And you've seen angels in times of worship that have brought things and have given things and have changed things. So if you would just kind of share one little story, and then we'll start wrapping it up. But I just felt like, especially where we are right now in this time period, that, God is doing, he is not just sitting there going, well, we'll see what they're going to do. Like, he is very, very active right now in what is going on, because he loves us. He loves his children, and he's hearing our prayers. So, but he's also hearing our worship.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is I actually have just a fun, fresh story from just recently, we're obviously, I'm part of the senior team at Bethel Atlanta, the church here in Atlanta, Georgia. And, we're having to kind of figure out how to do church when we're, needing to not meet physically together. And so we had our first online service this past Sunday. And so I was part of the team that was kind of managing that. And there's, just a handful of us in the room. And we set up a simple, you can actually see the live stream on our Facebook page of the worship if you want to. It'd be kind of fun to imagine what was going on in the spirit at the same time. But, there's just four just of the worship team just sitting there in a circle, just worshiping God in the middle of a season of fear, in the middle of a season where a lot of people are being affected in challenging ways financially, physically. And to have the opportunity in the midst of that to set those things aside and just gaze upon the Lord. I just watched as this rush of a white cloud fill the room. It was almost like his presence was desperate for a place to land, And I know there's so many people praying right now. There's so many people doing good work right now. So I don't want to say that there's not enough people, focus on the presence, because man, I'm seeing so many people shine right now, and that's beautiful. But it was almost like because of the fear and everything that's going on in the world, it's almost like God is more hungry to show up, even more ready to just respond to anything. And so just the entire room filled up top to bottom with this white cloud that was just moving and swirling, and with every movement it went out. With every movement it left. We were just in our offices there, but with every movement, every note, the presence of the Lord just shot out in this direction, shot out in that direction. And I was looking at, and as I've been looking in the spirit during this time, I see a lot more angelic activity, and I see a lot more demonic activity. It's the enemy's moving, trying to release as much fear as possible, and the Lord's moving to release his kingdom. But I'm watching these waves of worship just cut paths through the landscape of just clearing out any demonic activity, making clear ways for where the angels are going and what they're doing and what they're releasing. And it's our worship leader, Vanessa Hale. She was speaking in our church a few weeks ago, and she just said the theme of her message was recognizing the consequences of our worship. That there are powerful consequences to our worship, to what the things that happen when we worship God. It is for Him, but because He is who He is, it's for our city. When you're worshiping alone in your house, it is changing the dynamic of your city. It is releasing waves of His presence, waves of His glory. Your neighbors are experiencing life differently when you worship. And of course, naturally, your household, you yourself, your family, but it's so much bigger than that. And it was just beautiful to see these waves of worship just carving paths for the purposes of God to be released all across the land. And so it is. Afterwards, I just thanked the worship team for showing up, for all the technical team for just getting everything together, to the best of their ability. Like, there's something so powerful about us creating opportunities for one another to focus on God and worship Him. And the consequences are truly tremendous.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. And I think especially because, we're sitting here and we're trying to kind of figure out, okay, we're going to be doing church, we're going to be doing it different. And people can say, well, how can I connect? Well, our spirits connect. We are spiritual beings. And so we connect as one when we all worship, in heaven. People have said that they could hear the sounds, and everything is just beautifully woven together into one perfect sound. And so as we're worshiping, like you said, in our house, we're changing atmospheres as we worship in our cars. But even as your heart, you can put yourself into a constant place where you make your temple, your body, a place that constantly worships, because it's not just in song, but it's in thought. Our heart just can cry out to the Lord 24/7. And just even as we sleep, we can just be crying out and just worshiping His goodness and His faithfulness and who He is. And that we can come into a place where that's how fear can't have a right in being in there. Because when you are constantly worshiping, you're constantly staying in that love flow. Where's fear going to go? Right out the window. It's not going to stick, right?
Absolutely.
So this was so awesome, Blake. You are so awesome. I just really encourage you guys to get this book called Indestructible. I'm bringing it over this way. Indestructible. I'm very serious when I say, and you guys know me, I don't just say things to say things. If you've never read Blake's book, get the veil. Oh, heck yeah. You start with the veil, because then after the veil, then you go into, is it that God is good, or the goodness of God?
Profound Good is the second one.
Profound Good. Sorry. And that was a great book. I read that one too, because we talked about that book. And now I get to talk about Indestructible. So the next book that you have, Blake, I would love for you to come on. And if you guys are interested in connecting with Blake, you can find him at Blake K as in King, Healy.com, because he wears a crown because he is a son of the Most High God. So you can just remember it that way. But get your books. I am telling you, you have some time to read. You can even download it, get your copy, start. I mean, seriously, your eyes will be open to an entire new world, and it's going to start to change things for you, because you are going to see that God is giving us these opportunities to see things with his eyes so that we can be indestructible and we can live a life that is going to be power packed, and we are going to have the victory in every situation because we are his children. And so he wants us to win. How about that?
Absolutely.
So, Blake, I just thank you so much. I know that you have to go. I thank you so much for your time. And this has just been fantastic. Thank you guys for tuning in. I have another Touch by Prayer tomorrow. I have Steve Peace Harmon. Oh, heck to the yeah. Steve is just awesome sauce. I love Steve. And we're going to talk some more about demons and angels. And we're going to talk about the spiritual realm. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be able to live a victorious life in the spirit, because that's what Steve does. And so tomorrow it's going to be awesome. It's going to be at our normal time at 8:00. And I thank you again, Blake, for coming on and sharing your awesome testimonies, your awesome book, and just your awesomeness.
Thank you so much. It was a joy being here.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, 3:00 tomorrow, we're going to be praying for our nation. So you want to tune in if you want to come and join me in for some prayer. We're going to start to change this thing around. Let me tell you something. We have the victory. So don't even think about that fear, because it's not here. No fear here, right, Blake? No fear here.
That's right. Nowhere.
That's it. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Just remember to go out and touch someone. God bless and good night.